I told my son. He'd never make it, then watched him succeed without me. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, thick cream paper with embossed lettering. I held it at the kitchen counter, my thumb pressed against the corporate logo I didn't recognize, and felt the weight of expensive stationery between my fingers. Inside was an invitation to a technology summit in San Francisco. My son's name appeared 3 times on the glossy program insert. Featured speaker, panel moderator, keynote address. I set it down next to my coffee and stared at the man in the small headshot, successful and smiling. A stranger in a tailored suit who used to sit across from me at this same counter doing homework in wrinkled t-shirts. I had not spoken to Michael in 4 years. The invitation had arrived at my address, forwarded through some automatic mailing list that still connected my name to his emergency contacts from college applications a decade ago. Someone in his company's marketing department had no idea they were sending this to a man who had been edited out of the narrative entirely. I turned the program over and studied the brief biography. Founded his own firm at 27. Secured venture funding within 8 months. Expanded to 4 cities. None of it mentioned family. I folded everything back into the envelope and placed it in the drawer where I kept documents I was not ready to discard but could not bear to display. The silence in the house pressed against my ears. I had lived alone since the divorce 6 years ago, and the quiet had become a companion that asked nothing of me. But that morning it felt accusatory. I am 58 years old. My back complains when I stand too quickly, and my knees remind me of every basketball game I played in my 30s. I wear reading glasses now and keep them on a chain because I misplaced them otherwise. I wake at 5:30 every morning without an alarm and make the same breakfast I have made for 30 years. My routines are deliberate and narrow. They keep me functional and upright and moving forward through hours that otherwise have no particular shape or urgency. I worked as an operations manager for a manufacturing plant until I took early retirement 2 years ago. The pension is adequate. The days are long. I had built my life on principles I believed were unassailable. Discipline, accountability, results. I raised Michael the way my own father raised me, with clear expectations and firm consequences. No coddling, no participation trophies. The world did not reward softness, and I was not going to send my son into it unprepared. When he brought home report cards, I circled the grades that disappointed and asked what he planned to do differently. When he talked about dreams, I asked about plans. When he failed, I made sure he understood that failure was a choice born from insufficient effort. His mother thought I was too hard on him. We fought about it quietly at first, then louder as the years went on. She accused me of crushing his spirit. I told her she was raising him to be weak. Michael learned to stop bringing things to me. He showed his mother his drawings and his writing and the projects that excited him. He showed me only what was required. By the time he was 16, our conversations had compressed into functional exchanges about grades, chores, and curfew. I told myself this was normal. Teenage boys did not want to talk to their fathers. They would reconnect later when maturity gave them perspective. The rupture came during his senior year of high school. He had applied to colleges with strong computer science programs and received acceptance letters from 3 of them. I had saved money for his education, enough to cover tuition if he chose a state school and lived at home. He wanted to go to a private university 800 miles away, a school I had never heard of with a tuition rate that seemed designed to bankrupt families. When he told me his choice, I was standing in the garage organizing tools. I remember the wrench in my hand and the way the overhead light caught the chrome. I asked him how he planned to pay for it. He said he had been awarded a partial scholarship and could take loans for the rest. I asked him what made him think that was a reasonable decision. He started to explain something about the program and the opportunities and the connections he could make. I cut him off. I told him he was being impractical and irresponsible. I told him that borrowing tens of thousands of dollars for an expensive school when a perfectly good state university would give him the same degree was the kind of thinking that destroyed lives. I told him that if he could not understand basic financial logic, maybe he was not ready for college at all. He stood there in the doorway between the garage and the kitchen, his acceptance letter in his hand. His face did a complicated thing I had seen before, a tightening around the eyes and mouth that meant he was working hard not to react. He asked me quietly if I was saying I would not help him. I said I was not going to subsidize stupidity. He could go to the state school, or he could figure it out on his own. What he said next was soft and even. You have never believed I could do anything right. I told him that was not true, that I had always held him to high standards because I knew he was capable of meeting them. He shook his head. No, he said. You have always expected me to fail. You have spent my whole life waiting for me to prove you right. I felt heat rise in my chest, the old familiar anger at being misunderstood, at having my motives twisted into something ugly. I said, if you are going to stand there and blame me for your own inability to think clearly, then maybe you are proving me right. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, I am going to that school. I am going to take the loans. And I am going to make something of myself. And you are not going to be part of it. I told him he was making a mistake he would regret for the rest of his life. He said, I have already made that mistake. I spent 18 years thinking you might be proud of me someday. He left the garage. I heard his footsteps on the stairs and the sound of his bedroom door closing with careful precision. Not a slam, just a definitive click. I went back to organizing my tools. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was anger. I told myself he was being dramatic and emotional, and that he would cool down and see reason. I told myself I was protecting him from a future of debt and regret. He moved out 6 weeks later. His mother helped him pack. By then, she and I were barely speaking. The divorce papers were filed 3 months after he left. In the years that followed, I received updates only through my ex-wife. Michael had gone to that expensive school. He had worked 2 jobs while taking a full course load. He had graduated with honors. He had moved to a city I had never visited and started working for a tech startup I had never heard of. Then he had left that company and started his own. My ex-wife told me these things in brief, clinical sentences during the rare phone calls when logistics required us to communicate. She did not editorialize. She did not tell me I had been wrong. She simply reported facts and waited for me to respond. I usually said something neutral and ended the call. I did not reach out to Michael. Pride is a structure that becomes load-bearing. Once you have built your identity on being right, admitting error feels like dismantling the foundation of your entire self. I told myself he needed to come to me. I told myself that if he had truly been wronged, he would have sought reconciliation. His silence confirmed that he was stubborn and unforgiving, traits that obviously came from his mother's side. But late at night, when routines could not fill the space, I thought about that moment in the garage. I replayed the conversation in different configurations, looking for the place where I could have said something else, something that would have led to a different outcome. I never found it. Every version ended the same way, with my son walking away and me standing in the fluorescent light holding a wrench. The invitation sat in the drawer for 3 days before I took it out again. I read the program more carefully this time. Michael's keynote was titled, Building Systems That Scale, Lessons in Sustainable Growth. There was a brief abstract about infrastructure and leadership and long-term thinking. It sounded competent and polished. It sounded like someone I did not know. I found myself searching for his company online. The website was clean and professional. The About page listed a team of 32 people. There were photos of a modern office with exposed brick and standing desks. There were testimonials from clients I had heard of. National brands that trusted this operation my son had built, from nothing. I clicked through case studies and blog posts and a media page that linked to interviews he had given. In one video clip, he talked about failure as a necessary component of innovation. He was articulate and confident. He smiled easily. He did not look like someone nursing old wounds. I wondered if he ever thought about me at all. I began to construct a plan, tentative and half-formed. I could attend the summit. It was open to the public with a registration fee. I could sit in the audience and listen to him speak. He would not know I was there. Afterward, if the moment felt right, I could approach him. I could tell him I was proud of what he had built. I could ask if we might talk, perhaps over coffee. No expectations, just a conversation. The idea sat in my mind for a week, gathering complications. I found myself rehearsing approaches in my head while I made breakfast, while I drove to the grocery store, while I lay awake at 3 in the morning staring at the ceiling. Each imagined conversation ended differently. In some versions, he was receptive, even relieved. In others, he was cold and dismissive. In the worst ones, he simply walked away without a word. I started researching everything I could find about his company. I read every article, watched every interview clip. I wanted to understand what he had built, not just the surface facts, but the substance of it. His firm designed software infrastructure for mid-sized companies, helping them scale their operations without collapsing under their own growth. The work was technical and abstract, but the more I read, the more I recognized something familiar in his approach. He talked about building foundations that could bear weight, about anticipating stress points before they failed, about the importance of structure and planning. These were principles I had taught him, in my own way. I had always emphasized preparation, discipline, the need to think 3 steps ahead. He had taken those values and applied them to a world I did not understand, had transformed them into something productive instead of punitive. The realization sat uncomfortably in my chest. I had given him tools, but I had wielded them as weapons. He had learned to use them as instruments of creation. I called my ex-wife on a Saturday morning. We had not spoken in 5 months. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice cautious. "It's me," I said. "I know," she said. There was a pause. "Is something wrong?" "No. I wanted to ask you something about Michael." Another pause, longer this time. "What about him?" "How is he?" I asked. The question sounded absurd, too simple for the weight I was trying to carry. "I mean, really, is he happy?" She was quiet for so long I thought she might have hung up. Then she said, "Why are you asking me this now?" "I received an invitation to a conference where he's speaking. I've been reading about his company. I just wondered if you still talk to him." "Sometimes," she said. "Not often. He's busy. But when you do talk, does he seem okay?" "He seems like someone who built a life he's proud of," she said. Her tone was careful, neutral. "He doesn't talk about you, if that's what you're asking." I absorbed that. I wasn't planning to reach out to him. I just wanted to know if he was doing well. "He's doing better than well," she said. "He's exactly where he wanted to be." "Good," I said. "That's good." "Is there anything else?" she asked. I wanted to ask her if she thought I should go to the conference. I wanted to ask if she thought Michael would ever forgive me. I wanted to ask if she had forgiven me. Instead, I said, "No, thank you." She hung up without saying goodbye. The conversation stayed with me for days. "He does not talk about you." The words should have hurt, but instead they felt like confirmation of something I already knew. I had made myself irrelevant. I had trained him to function without me. The fact that he had done exactly that was not his failure. It was mine. I thought about my own father, dead now for 15 years. He had been a hard man, demanding and cold. I had spent my 20s trying to earn his approval, and my 30s resenting him for withholding it. When he died, I felt relief, more than grief. I had told myself I would be different with my own son. I would have standards, yes, but I would also be present. I would be fair. But standing in my kitchen with my ex-wife's words echoing in my head, I understood that I had simply replicated the same pattern with better intentions. I had been present in body, but absent in warmth. I had been fair according to rules I never questioned. I had given Michael a childhood shaped by the same cold architecture that had shaped mine, and I had called it love. The idea sat in my mind for a week, gathering complications. What if he saw me and walked away? What if he made a scene? What if his success had cemented his anger, given him the proof he needed that I had been wrong and he had been right? I would be asking for something I had no right to request. I would be the one showing up uninvited, inserting myself into a life he had carefully constructed without me. But the alternative was letting more years pass until the gap became unbridgeable. I registered for the summit on a Thursday evening, entering my credit card information with hands that felt clumsy on the keyboard. The confirmation email arrived immediately. I printed it and placed it in a folder with the original invitation. Then I booked a flight and a hotel room and tried not to think about the fact that I was spending money to attend a technology conference where I would understand almost nothing except the presence of my estranged son on stage. The weeks before the trip passed slowly. I told no one where I was going. I maintained my routines with even greater precision than usual, as if strict adherence to structure could steady something that felt increasingly fragile. I mowed the lawn in exact diagonal lines. I cleaned the gutters. I organized the basement. I did everything except ask myself what I actually hoped would happen. The flight to San Francisco was unremarkable. I do not enjoy flying and never have, but I endured it the way I endure most unpleasant necessities, by remaining still and waiting for it to end. The hotel was downtown, modern and anonymous, the kind of place designed for business travelers who needed clean sheets and reliable internet and nothing else. I checked in on a Sunday afternoon and stood at the window of my room looking out at a city I did not know, filled with people living lives I could not imagine. The summit began Monday morning in a convention center that smelled like new carpet and coffee. I collected my badge from a registration table staffed by young people in matching shirts. They smiled and welcomed me and handed me a tote bag filled with branded items I would never use. I found the main hall and took a seat near the back, away from the clusters of attendees who seemed to know each other. The first session was a panel discussion on venture capital trends. I understood perhaps 1/3 of what was said. The panelists spoke quickly and referenced concepts I had no framework for. I watched the audience instead, trying to identify who was important and who was simply present. People typed on laptops and checked phones and nodded at moments that seemed significant to them. Michael's keynote was scheduled for 2 o'clock. I skipped lunch and stayed in my seat, unwilling to risk missing anything. The hall filled gradually. By the time the moderator took the stage to introduce him, nearly every seat was occupied. She listed his accomplishments with enthusiasm. Age 29, founder and CEO, fastest growing firm in his sector. Invited to speak at conferences across the country. I watched the screen behind her where his headshot was displayed in high resolution. He looked older than I remembered, but not by much. His hair was shorter. He wore glasses now, thin wire frames that gave him a serious, focused appearance. Then he walked onto the stage, and the audience applauded, and I realized I had been holding my breath. He moved with easy confidence, comfortable in the space and the attention. He thanked the moderator and made a small joke that landed well. Then he began to speak, and I stopped tracking the content of his words and simply listened to the fact of his voice, grown deeper and more assured than the last time I had heard it. He talked about building systems that could grow without collapsing. He used metaphors and anecdotes and data points. He spoke about the importance of hiring people smarter than yourself and creating cultures where failure was treated as information rather than punishment. He told a story about an early disaster in his company's history, a project that had failed spectacularly, and how that failure had taught him more than any success could have. I think we are often taught that mistakes are something to avoid, he said, that they represent weakness or lack of preparation. But the truth is, mistakes are just feedback. They tell you where your model was incomplete. The question is whether you are willing to listen. The audience murmured approval. I sat very still. He took questions at the end. Someone asked about work-life balance. He smiled and said he was still figuring that out, that he was better at building companies than at maintaining relationships. And that was something he was trying to improve. The audience laughed gently, a sound of recognition and sympathy. When it was over, people stood and applauded again. He waved and exited the stage. I remained seated as the crowd filtered out around me, moving toward networking sessions and coffee breaks. I felt unmoored, as if the ground had shifted slightly beneath me. I had come here with a half-formed plan to approach him. Now that the moment was approaching, I could not make my body move. What would I say? Congratulations on proving me wrong? I am sorry for spending your childhood making you feel inadequate? I sat in the emptying hall and felt the full weight of the years I had let pass. Eventually I stood. I followed the general flow of people toward the lobby area, where clusters had formed around high tables. I scanned faces, looking for him. I saw him before he saw me, standing near a window with two other people, holding a bottle of water and nodding at something one of them was saying. I began to move in that direction. My pulse was loud in my ears. I was 3 tables away when someone stepped in front of me, a young woman with a bright smile and a clipboard. "Are you enjoying the conference?" she asked. I said yes automatically. She launched into a pitch for a mailing list. I half listened, glancing past her toward the window. Michael was still there, but now he was looking down at his phone. By the time I extricated myself from the conversation, he was gone. I searched the lobby and the adjoining halls. I checked the schedule and saw that he was moderating a panel in an hour. I found the room and took a seat in the front row this time, determined not to lose him again. The panel was about scaling operations. Michael asked smart questions and guided the conversation with a steady hand. He was good at this, at managing voices and drawing out useful information. I wondered where he had learned it. What experiences had shaped these skills? I had no idea what his life looked like day to day, who his friends were, whether he was in a relationship, what he did when he was not working. I knew nothing. When the panel ended, I stood immediately. He was gathering his notes at the front table. I moved toward him, weaving through people who were slower to leave their seats. I was 10 feet away when someone called his name. He turned, and his face opened into a smile. He moved toward the voice, toward someone. He knew, and I stopped walking. I could push forward. I could call his name. I could make him see me. But standing there, watching him greet someone with warmth and ease, I understood something I had been avoiding. I had no right to interrupt his life. I had forfeited that right the moment I told him he was not good enough, the moment I let him leave without trying to repair what I had broken. He had built this life carefully, without me, and it was working. He was happy. He was successful. He was surrounded by people who respected him. My presence would not add anything. It would only take. I left the room. I walked back through the lobby and out into the late afternoon sun. The city was loud with traffic and voices. I stood on the sidewalk and let people flow past me. That evening, I sat in my hotel room and wrote him a letter. I had never been good at spoken apologies, at finding the right words in the moment. But I could write. I could take my time and say things clearly. I told him I had attended the summit. I told him I had watched him speak and that he had been impressive and articulate and everything I should have told him he could be when he was younger. I told him I was sorry. Not a conditional apology. Not an excuse wrapped in justification. Just sorry. I was sorry for making him feel that my approval was something he had to earn, and then withholding it no matter what he achieved. I was sorry for valuing my own rigid principles over his happiness. I was sorry for letting pride keep me silent for 4 years. I told him I understood if he did not want a relationship. I told him I was not asking for anything. I just wanted him to know that I had been wrong and that I was proud of him and that he had become a better man than I had ever been. I read it over 3 times. Then I folded it, placed it in an envelope, and addressed it to his company. I did not include a return address. I left it at the front desk to be mailed. The next morning, I flew home. I returned to my routines, to the quiet house and the empty hours. But something had shifted. The silence was no longer neutral. It was a space I had created, a consequence I had earned. The first week back, I moved through my days with a strange sense of displacement. I kept expecting something to feel different, but the house looked the same. The furniture occupied the same positions. The dishes sat in the same cabinets. My life had not changed. Only my understanding of it had. I found myself thinking about time in new ways. I was 58 years old. If I was lucky, I had 20 or 30 years remaining. I had spent the first 58 building a life of rigid order and hollow accomplishment. I had a paid-off house, a sufficient pension, a well-maintained lawn, and no one to share any of it with. I had optimized for control and lost everything that mattered. I started taking walks in the evenings, something I had never done before. I would leave the house as the sun was setting and walk through my neighborhood, past houses where families lived, where I could see through lit windows into lives that seemed warmer than mine. I saw fathers playing with children in yards. I saw teenagers laughing on porches. I saw ordinary moments of connection that I had treated as distractions when I had the chance to experience them myself. One evening, I walked past a man teaching his daughter to ride a bike. She was maybe 7 or 8, wobbly and uncertain. She kept veering into the grass. The father ran alongside her, one hand on the seat, patient and encouraging. "You've got it," he kept saying. "Just keep pedaling. I'm right here." She fell twice while I watched. Both times he helped her up, checked her knees, adjusted her helmet. Both times she got back on. The third time, she made it all the way to the end of the block. Her father cheered and jogged after her, and when he caught up, she was beaming. I stood there on the sidewalk, a stranger watching someone else's family, and felt something crack open in my chest. I could not remember ever teaching Michael to ride a bike with that kind of patience. I could not remember cheering for him that way. I remembered correcting his form and telling him to try harder. I remembered walking away when he fell because I thought struggling would make him tougher. I walked home as the streetlights came on and sat in my kitchen in the dark for a long time. I do not know if he read the letter. He has not responded. I do not expect him to. But 2 months ago, I received an email. It was brief and careful. He said he had gotten my letter. He said he appreciated it. He said he was not ready to talk yet, but that maybe someday he would be. He signed it simply, Michael. I read it a dozen times that first day. I have read it many times since. I do not know what someday means. I do not know if I will hear from him again. But I know I will wait. I have spent years demanding that the world bend to my expectations. I can spend whatever time remains learning to accept what I am offered with gratitude. I keep his email in a folder on my desktop. I look at it sometimes, late at night, when the house is especially quiet. I read those 3 words, maybe someday, and I let them be enough. Because the truth I spent a lifetime avoiding is this: love is not about being right. It is not about holding people to standards or teaching them hard lessons. It is about believing in them even when they stumble. It is about making space for them to become who they are meant to be, not who you need them to be. I failed at that. I looked at my son and saw only the places where he fell short of my image of what he should be. I never saw him. Not really. But he saw himself clearly enough to leave, and he built a life that did not need my approval to have value. I told him he would never make it. I was wrong about everything except one thing. He did make it, spectacularly, undeniably. He succeeded so completely that he did not need me to validate it. That is the betrayal I have to live with, not his, mine. I betrayed his trust, his hope, his childhood belief that his father would be proud of him no matter what. I spent 18 years telling him in 1,000 small ways that he was not enough. And when he finally walked away, he did not collapse. He did not come crawling back. He did not need me. That is what I see now, sitting in this house I keep too clean, living days I have made too small. My son is out there in the world, building things, leading people, giving keynote addresses to rooms full of strangers who admire him. He is living a life that has nothing to do with me. And if someday he decides to open the door a crack, to let me see even a small part of that life, I will be grateful beyond measure. Because I know now what I should have known all along. He was always capable. He was always strong. He was always enough. I was the one who was not.